No, but they pray.
This time I will call the meeting of the Marshall City Council to order with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. We do have an agenda before us. We'll move to agenda item number 2, which is to consider changes or additions or deletions to that agenda. One change, if we move down, can you move us down to a little bit farther in the agenda? One change is the first items of new business. We're going to reverse the order of the first and second item of new business. So that would be the presentation by our on the insurance renewal will be the first item of new business. Any other changes to the agenda? You got that already? Great. Okay. Any other?
Can you delete the reference to the memorandum of understanding between the city and Prairie Home Hospice?
Number 18 has been requested to be removed from the agenda.
Yes.
Okay. Everyone's in agreement there? Any other changes to the agenda? If not, we'll operate under that agenda. We'll move to agenda item number 3. Now, just a note for the council, there's a glitch with the electronic meeting software this evening. So the software is working fine until it comes to the time of votes. So, Kyle, you have everything working, so never mind what I was just saying.
We'll stand by for changes.
Yes.
So agenda item number 3.
You'll vote for us, right? Yeah.
Agenda item number 3 is consider the approval of the minutes of the special meeting and the regular city council meeting that were both held on September 12th. The council does have the minutes. Are there any corrections to note at this time?
Mr. Mayor, I would motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by John to approve the minutes of both meetings as they have been presented. We'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4 is a consent agenda. We'll bring the items up on the screen that are on the consent agenda this evening, which include consider the authorization accepting the contract from October 1st, 2017 to September 30th, 2022 for the Southwest Minnesota Chemical Assessment Team and to designate Public Safety Director Rob Yan or his designee as the primary representative for the team for administration and fiscal administration. Also on the consent agenda, consider declaring the public works equipment as surplus equipment, declaring miscellaneous unclaimed evidence as surplus property for the Marshall Police Department. Consider the request of Norma Rasky for a 5-year renewal permit for a conditional use permit for a home occupation to conduct a beauty shop business at 1105 Washington Avenue in an R11 family resident district. Consider the application for a temporary on-sale intoxicating liquor license for Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce for December 4th, 2017. Consider the application for a temporary on-sale liquor license for Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce for an event November 16, 2017. And then consider the approval of the bills and the project payment. So is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the council wants removed for purposes of separate discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I would like 5 and 8 pulled.
Any other item?
I move approval of the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve to approve the remaining items with the exception of 5 and 8 on the consent agenda. We'll pause for just a second while the agenda is adjusted.
it shows the items that were pulled from consent, and I don't think they were all supposed to have been. You want us to put them back under consent?
Yeah, the only two that should be down are 8 and 9, 10 and 11 should go back up in the consent agenda.
8 and 5. Yeah.
Up on top.
But now they're 8 and 9.
Renumbered as 8 and 9. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which ones are supposed to be?
10 and 11 go back up.
Yeah, 8 and 9 that are in the approval of items pulled, those two should stay there. 10, the declaring public works equipment surplus, and 11, the application for temporary permit, those should go back in the consent agenda.
There we go.
There we go.
Yep, that's good.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
So the motion was by Steve, and the second was by Craig to
Other way
approve.
around, actually.
Motion by Craig, second by Steve. Okay. So we can move to vote. That motion passes. So now we'll move to the next agenda item. And this is agenda item number 10. This is consider the authorization for the contract for the Southwest Minnesota Chemical Assessment Team. Steve?
Yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, I just wanted a little clarification on this as I read through this. My notes say, please give me more information as to one of the 11 state hazardous materials response teams in paragraph 2. In paragraph 5, the comment, quote, I believe it is important for our region to have the team continued as there is no other team within 2 hours of Marshall. In Region 6, our region, we have major rail lines, 2 of which are in Lyon County, pipelines, major roadways, and quote, concerned me, where are the other teams located? And what necessitates having a CAT team presence? What do communities outside of rapid response area do? So both of you can.
Well, the closest teams, it'd probably be a toss-up between St. Cloud and Mankato. Those are the adjacent ones. We also go all the way up to, we split all of western Minnesota with Moorhead. So we go up, as you can see, quite a ways north. And then the purpose of the teams is to have a team that can respond to hazardous materials spill and support the fire departments.
So when you look at, we go all the way up north on the western side of the state.
Yes.
We're almost outside that 2 hour. Who sets these regions? Maybe the regions need to be smaller.
Well, it is, that's a great observation, but it's twofold. One is they have a desire area, and then they put out requests for proposals from communities. There used to be one in Morris, but Marshall Cat has always been the closest one to like the Iowa-South Dakota border in the Sioux Falls corner, and Mankato has been a cat team for pretty much forever, and so is St. Cloud. But Morris was a private industry. Cat team was very unusual, and it was the training obligations for West Central Environmental, who housed that cat team. They felt those obligations were too extensive for what they were doing with them being in the cleanup business as a primary function. They opted out, which then left it here. The equipment from there ended up actually going to International Falls. So, yeah, and then the other part of that for the city, for communities within the district, and each CAT team also supports the other CAT teams as mutual aid. So they're force multipliers if they need to stack them or couple them together. But they're really the safety and science officers for local public safety that have an incident.
Yes.
So they come in and support that part of the operation. They do not support the industry other than if we had something in Marshall proper, because at that point in time, Rob and the Marshall Cat are a city asset.
Yes.
As soon as they leave the city limits, they become an asset of the state of Minnesota.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, is there a motion? Steve?
Move to accept.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 11.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I pulled this one out because we've addressed this before, and any time we have a conditional use permit, my understanding is that it runs with the land. So when we have a request for five-year renewal, it seems it's a moot point. It goes with the land. So as long as Ms. Rasky is holding true to the conditional use permit requirements, she can have it into perpetuity, is my understanding, according to the subdivision 3 of Minnesota Statute 462.3595.
And we did discuss that if there is a timeline put on it, I think that would justify a staff review to make sure that all the components, everything's being met. And if so, then it doesn't have to come back here. It doesn't have to go to the Planning Commission. So I think we're eliminating a few meetings, assuming compliance, and we just have staff verify the timeliness, and that should do it.
So is that do we need to do a change then in our ordinance to match state rule?
Right, just in our practice and
Just
procedure.
our practice and policies,
Okay.
right?
So the 5-year limitation in the original CUP then would be reviewed by staff for compliance with the other conditions and not come back as a renewal even to the Planning Commission.
That's correct.
Yeah, that would take a change to what we currently do because we handle renewals just like they were in the original CUP. So they come to the Planning Commission first, and we look at any issues that it's like a hearing where the neighborhood can come in and say, gee, the parking has gotten out of hand in the neighborhood because of this, for instance. So that's how we've done it in the past. I'm great with streamlining it and doing a review, but do we still do the review every 5 years, or is it just it goes forever with that property, with that existing use, as long as there's no non-compliance with the original CUP?
Well, I think this is really, how do we comply with the current state statute? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
We'll develop that, but that's why you have the public hearing at day one.
Day
for
one.
people to object. And then I think if you have.
And Craig?
And I think the 5-year review is probably okay to go back and say, but I mean, if they're a year into it and you're getting complaints, I think that warrants a review because it's a conditional use permit for a reason, that it doesn't fit, totally or nicely into the zoning. So you get a conditional use, they're allowed to operate under conditions. If the complaint alleges that they're failing to meet the condition, at that point in time, then the permit comes into question, right?
So then we go back to the Planning Commission.
Right, but only if they were violating the conditions. But I think that either screening it by complaint or in a time frame just to verify that's something that I think could be worked out.
So we have two things. We'll have the review of the policy and practice to update that.
Okay.
In this case, Norma, I believe you said this is the 7th time that you've been back here
Yeah.
over the years for 5-year renewals. So I think in fairness to the applicant, we should act on this, recognizing that we're also going to review our.
I move that we allow the conditional use permit without the further 5-year stipulation. We change our rules so she can have it until she's not compliant.
Motion by Steve,
Second.
seconded by Craig. Discussion?
I have a quick question. Do they pay for a renewal?
Yes.
So that would also go away with the current
Yes.
statute. So since that is state law, should Norma get refunded for her payment on this since
Yes.
it is not compliant with?
Yes.
State statute.
We will take care of that with her.
Thanks, Glenn.
Yep.
Any other discussion on the motion?
Norma, you're still welcome to come back once in a while and
Yep.
visit us if you'd like.
See you in 5 years.
5 years.
Maybe some of us.
So we'll move to a vote.
Your computer screen is dead.
That's pretty good. Maybe it'll come back.
We'll go to a voice vote on this. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
So we'll move then to, actually one more down. go to agenda item number 14. Now we have the right one. So agenda item number 14, consider the 2018 League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust property casualty and liability insurance. Carla, you're going to introduce this, and also Sheldon Kimpling, our agent of record, is here to present also. Carla?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The City of Marshall carries casualty, property, and liability insurance with the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, and this is renewed annually. And Sheldon Kimpling is with us tonight to summarize the renewal point going forward for October 1st, 2017 insurance.
Thank you, Carla. Welcome, Sheldon.
Thank you, Mayor. City Council, thank you very much for moving me up on the agenda. You've got the summary there and the premium breakdown for the renewal. I also put the last 3 years so you have some form of reference on where the premiums are going. Overall, League of Minnesota Cities is no different than any other insurance company. We're just not having real large rate changes up or down. We can start right from the top and go down. You can see the property values. Property premiums are up slightly, but that's a little bit of a misnomer because the premiums are up only because of our coverage increases. We've made quite a few changes and adding things, plus the League of Minnesota Cities has a 4% annual inflation guard on there. So you can see the property values went from just over $179 million to $197 million, but there was a 4% rate decrease. Overall, because of the property value increase, the premium went from $152,617 to $154,246. The mobile property is any piece of mobile property or contractor's equipment that's not licensed that has a value of greater than $25,000. Anything that has a value of under $25,000 is automatically covered. Slight decrease in rate there, not much change in coverage. $12,602 to $11,740. Municipal liability had a 2.5% rate decrease, but they had a exposure increase. The basis for the city, the households, the sewer connections, the number of police officers, all of the exposures that the city of Marshall has increased, which caused that premium to go from $95,109 to $102,139. The auto coverage, which is both the physical damage and the auto liability, they had no rate change, but as we're changing vehicles out, there was a slight exposure increase, went from $23,514 to $24,348. The crime coverage is the actual forgery. All the coverage doesn't involve money. There's $300,000 worth of coverage there. The premium is not broken down. It's included in the package. The liquor liability, you can see the liquor liability, the sales were up. The sales were up from just over $4 million to $4.7 million. No rate change, but with that exposure increase, your premium went from $55.44 to $57.31. The bond coverage had just a slight rate change, no exposure change. Went from $1,582 to $1,579. The excess is the additional, it's the umbrella coverage, an additional $1 million coverage over both the general liability, work comp, and the auto. That premium the premium went up, but it was because of the exposure change. It follows the general liability. If your general liability premium exposures increase, the excess $1 million increases. So that premium went from $34,463 to $37,996. So from the League of Minnesota Cities, their package total went from $325,431 to $337,749. The bottom two coverages there are not part of the League's program. The City of Marshall owns the airport liability. A decision was made several years ago that the amount of coverage through the League was not adequate for the exposure for the airport, so we went outside of the League and got coverage elsewhere. So you have a $5 million general liability limit through ACE USA. The premium actually went down, but the only reason it went down is because the City of Marshall is subject to their minimum premiums, and their minimum premium went from $2,150 to $2,000. So it wasn't a rate change. It was just we're below their minimum premium, and that happened to go down slightly. So $150 decrease in premium there. The equipment breakdown coverage is through Hartford Steam Boiler, and that had a premium increase. There was no rate change, but again, with the values going up, we had the 4% increase, and there were some changes on which locations were being covered. So that premium went from $47,062 to $48,302. So you can see the totals there: $374,643 in 2016 to $388,051 in 17.
Very good. Questions for Greg?
Sheldon, just a quick question. The municipalities are not covered under the Minnesota Tort Limits Act.
They are.
Are we?
Yes. There's $1.5 million of coverage, which is the Minnesota tort limit, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, thank you.
And you may want to mention the equipment breakdown coverage, formerly called the boiler coverage. The common thing would be if there would be something within the infrastructure of the city that would fail, like a lift station and
Correct.
sewage would back up or something. That would
If
happen
equipment
because of
just fails, it's typically not covered under property insurance. If something with the municipalities went wrong, and it was just an equipment failure, it wasn't caused by wind, fire, hail, all the normal perils, it's not covered under the league's policy. We buy a Systems Go equipment breakdown policy for that coverage.
Thank you. Other questions?
You did a very nice job of explaining things. I appreciate that. With regard to the ones where we have option, where we can go out and get other coverage from other insurance companies,
Mm-hmm.
do we often shop around to see if there are better deals out there for policies, or
As far as I'm aware, throughout the state of Minnesota, there's only 3 companies that will do municipality. The League of Minnesota Cities has like 95% of it.
Right.
Travelers, CNA, and Chubb will all write municipalities. We have agencies in Rochester and Mankato and the Metro and St. Cloud, and all of the agencies write municipalities. And there was a time, I'll say about 6 years ago, that the city of Morris, for example, went outside of the league. But it doesn't happen very often, and the number one thing is the dividend. The premiums are very comparable with what's offered out there, but because the League of Minnesota Cities is a formation of other municipalities, as call them profits come in, they're just given back out to the cities in the form of a dividend. Well, when you take the premium charged and you take the dividend off that, the league becomes very competitive. But we do have access to other companies. If it's something that, down the road we want to look at, I'd have no problem doing that.
did you mention that? Did you say that the boiler coverage was with somebody else, though?
It is. The boiler coverage, there is boiler coverage offered within the league, but because of some of the exposures that we have through the utilities, primarily the gas turbine, it would be excluded because they can't cover that much of a limit under the league's policy. So we would have to take that one location to a separate company. When we quoted it out, it was cheaper to move the whole equipment breakdown coverage to a separate company.
And for that company, we've got good rates for that, and we've looked for other rates.
It's the same company that does it through the league. Just
Okay.
that the league has limits on what they would do.
Okay.
And because of some of our larger exposures, the program through the league, through Hartford Steam, the exact same company, it wouldn't be compatible, so we had to take it outside.
So we are shopping around trying to get the best deal.
Correct.
Yeah.
My recollection, Sheldon, a couple of years ago, we did look at that airport liability, and I thought we had 2 or 3 different quotes.
We did, and I could have brought them all, but Ace USA they're most competitive when they were $21.50. Now they're $150 more competitive.
So yes, Councilmember Baker, there have been various.
Any other questions?
I have a simple question. Why do we follow the federal fiscal year in our coverage rather than either the state or the city's fiscal year for insurance coverage?
We can have this set up at any date you want.
I just thought it was odd.
We've been the agents. Well, I've been here since '89, and it's always been this date. But if you want to move it to another date, it's very easy to do.
Should I ask Mayor
David?
a question? Carla, would it matter for your purposes if the renewal was January 1 or fiscal year rather than October 1? Is it just one more bill you pay at a certain time?
With October 1, it crosses over a year, so I have prepaid, since that's the only difference.
So we pay the premium all at once? So that is a pretty hefty prepayment. Maybe that's something we might look at for next year. Consideration.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Sheldon. I would entertain a motion for the renewal of our property casualty liability coverage.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Thanks, Sheldon.
Motion passes. Now we'll move back to agenda item number 13. No, we're not.
That's the wrong one. We're just testing you, Cal, to make that. Thanks.
Yeah. 20 seconds.
So we're on agenda item number 12, and we'll get to you, Cal. Which is consider the approval of the resolution in support of the chloride reduction in the water discharge to the Redwood River. So with that, Glenn, you'll introduce this. We also have a number of other representatives of Marshall Municipal Utilities, as well as Bob Van Moore from our wastewater.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This will be a little bit of a refresher, but it's really an important and expensive issue in front of the City of Marshall. We have a system that we have both an NDPES permit system with permits authorized or issued by the Minnesota Department of Health. And Bob Van Moore is here to kind of go through that series of slides. But the issue is this is going to be a water system improvement for our wastewater discharge system. Okay, so I call it kind of the pre-treatment system for wastewater, but really it's a water treatment system. So, Bob, if you want to, if we can pull that up.
Walk through the PowerPoint slide.
Yeah, and I've got this is ready to go. And we're both here for comments during the presentation, or anytime you see a question, just bring it up. Sorry,
this
Cal.
PowerPoint, I think you guys seen pretty much the same thing earlier this spring. We've had a lot of updates through the summer as we've kind of concentrated in getting down to the nitty gritty on this. So I have updated some of the slides, but. Yep, that's the right one. Yep. Okay. There again, this is going to be a lot of refresher for you, but we operate under a MPCA NPDES permit. We had our permit renewed back in 2014. We ended up getting a new limit that we never had before, and that was for chlorides. Currently, we're discharging about 560 milligrams per liter of chloride. Our new permit limit is going to be 261. We knew we couldn't meet that at the permit renewal, so they did give us a compliance schedule to work on this and try to come up with a solution of how we're going to meet this limit. So 2024 is the date, April of that year, we are supposed to meet our chloride limits. Okay. Oops. Can I advance it here, Ted? Okay. Just a quick overview. Chlorides is a salt. What happens and how the chlorides get in the wastewater, it's not normally in the groundwater. When we get the water out of the ground and the water plant treats it and filters it, it's a pretty low level of chloride in there. So that's not the issue. It's not the raw water. As the water is very hard in Marshall, and part of that is in order to soften, MMU does partial softening right now. They use lime softening, and that will bring down the hardness so it's not quite so bad in the homes, but it's still very hard coming out into the system from the water treatment plant. What happens then is everybody in their homes and the businesses have ion exchange water softeners, and when you do that, the salt resin is a positively charged ion in the softener. As the water trickles down through that, the ions grab that hardness out of the water, and you proceed with softer water in your homes. What happens is after a while that resin in there gets all bound up with this hardness, and we have to flush it off, and that's when you do your backwashes of your water softeners. When you backwash that, it's a very strong salt concentrate, and that gets discharged down into the wastewater, and that's what's causing the chlorides to come into the water. So once water or the salt gets in the water, it's extremely difficult to pull back out. It's completely dissolved, and the wastewater plants are not designed to take that out of there. So basically what we got coming into the treatment plant for chlorides is what we're discharging to the river. Equivalency, it doesn't sound like much. It's just some backwashes of water softeners into the wastewater stream, but if you equate what we're putting into the Redwood River every day is about 13,000 pounds of salt. It's a crazy number. It's the bear of where we live. It's very hard water, and that's really the only ion exchange is the most cost-effective way to treat that to get to the soft water where we need it. Road salt's also another cause of chlorides that get into the waste streams. That's MPCA is doing different things of trying to reduce that too. So it's a collaborative effort of trying to get rid of the chlorides out of the water. So they're gonna MMU does partially soften their water now. It's like 56 grains coming in, and they soften it down to about 35 grains. 35 is what's normally coming into your homes. What we're looking at as options is we can't physically treat it at the wastewater treatment plant once the salt is in there. So we're looking at options of trying to get it out, prevent it from getting into the wastewater streams. We've looked at different options, and the engineers come up with, for MMU to build a bigger water softening plant, further soften the water, get it down to more like a 5 to 10 grain softness. We'd be able to, everybody in town could turn their water softeners down. They wouldn't have to recharge as often. We'd use much less salt in your softeners. At that point, it'd be probably soft enough a lot of people wouldn't even use softeners at all. We'd be able just to discontinue them. In order to do that, it's a large expansion for the water treatment plant. They would end up adding a larger softening system. Along with the lime softening, they would add soda ash also to drive down that hardness, so we'd get a lot better result of water coming into the systems. Very expensive. The estimates are around $9 million for the addition to the water treatment plant. So at that point it gets hugely expensive, but we have looked into state funding, and there are PSIG grants out there that would allow up to $7 million towards this $9 million project. We did apply for it last year, and they ran out of money before they got to us. So discussions with MPCA that in order to get our best chance of getting this awarded to us next year would be to have the water plant designed, certified, ready to bid. So that's what we're kind of looking at right now tonight. Is we've got let's see, you can skip that one too. We had, go one more. There we go. The engineers for MMU is AE2S. They've done a look at it, and they're thinking for $815,000 they could get the design done. And we would have that basically ready to bid by next spring, late spring, early summer. We're proposing that about 90% of this project would be due to wastewater issues, so 10% would be MMU just upgrading existing equipment that they need to upgrade at their plant. So we're proposing that the City of Marshall wastewater treatment would, over the $9 million project, our total commitment would be about $1.143 million. Out of this design, money would go towards that total. MMU would be contributing to 10% of the design, and then probably about $900,000 of equipment that they need to do to keep their plant running, basically. So we feel it's very important that it's a wastewater issue, and the wastewater should work at getting this thing passed to correct the chloride issues. Basically, that's kind of where we're at. We can walk through these a little bit too. This is a repeat of the spring also. Basically, we're looking for, basically it's going to be improve the process from MMU. We're going to get a lot better, softer water coming out into the system. They'll be fixing some of their aging equipment issues that they're fighting, along with us being able to meet our chloride limit. So there's a little scale of exactly what hard water and soft water, the differences are. When you look at, we're talking grains on the left column there, anything over 10 grains is considered very hard water. Currently we're doing 35 grains into the system right now. So you can see why people are using the water softeners. Even if we get down to that 5 to 7 grains that we're talking, it'd still be moderately hard. But at that point, we're feeling very confident that with maybe some public education and maybe some ordinances against some of the industries, putting limits on some of them as far as how much chloride they can discharge, they would have to look at their processes and do something different. We would be able to meet our limit and still be a very good water coming out, and at that point we feel a lot of people won't even use softeners. So there again, it's not an MMU issue, it's a wastewater permit issue. This is kind of what we're talking about, is being able to tweak those down. Here's some of the numbers. We looked at what would happen if we just reduced the industries and left everybody else alone, and we looked at, you can go to the next one, different scenarios of how we could actually get to the point of meeting our limit. So basically it comes down to is we need to get the softer water out in the system. We need to get the compliance programs in, and whether it's rebates or ordinances, try to get people to tune their softeners down so we can reduce the amount of salt that's coming to us. Some of the improvements they would need to do at the water treatment plant, this $9 million project, they're increasing capacity to feed lime. The soda ash system would be a brand new system. Along with that, we have to do building additions to get the equipment. Because of your further softening, there's a lot more pH adjustment that needs to be done. And then the more we soften, the more lime you use, the more sludge cake that you produce and that you have to dispose of. So that gets to be a huge expense also. Some of the summary of the costs, this is where we came up with the different systems that total up to the $9 million project. Here's some of the impacts on the rates there. It is going to get more expensive for the water. The offset of that is you're going to be using a lot less salt in your homes to offset the amount that you're paying for the softer water. Those are listed in 100 cubic feet, those numbers up there. Basically per 1,000 gallons, the increase would be, total increase would be about $1.44 per 1,000 gallons. This is just a little summary of what would be done, and we're right now they're in pretty tough shape out there. They're going to have to do something with their equipment. So we're really hoping that we can get this through. Hopefully we get funding next year and we can progress into this before we have any major breakdowns out there. But kind of what I got. Take any questions?
Okay, thank you, Bob. Questions? Greg?
Yeah, maybe for Brad or Jeff, is there any issues with the softer water in the distribution system then with the impacts on pipes and you know, like the coatings that are in the pipe now for, you know, the...
Jeff, why don't you come up here? If you ask chemistry questions, Jeff's going to answer it.
Perfect.
Now, Craig, we do have to be careful to watch mostly pH and alkalinity to keep from flint issues or anything of that sort.
Sure, I know that, you know, like Vest and a few of the other communities, when they went off of their wells and went on to Lincoln Pipestone Rural Water, they had a lot of flaking issues, and it created problems in the valving and stuff in homes because they were shedding some of the mineral on the pipes.
And when the plant went online originally, there was a little bit of that, nothing too terrible. We would expect a little bit. There'll be some increased flushing as that water hits the system.
Okay. And can that can be phased too, to where you don't do it real quick. You
yep.
Scale it down or slope it down.
Exactly.
Perfect.
So Jeff, when you're trading off chloride ions for the lime and the soda ash, those are all extremely basic things. Mm-hmm. How much alteration in the pH are you throwing the water into? Because
right
salt
now,
water is about pH of 7. I mean, it's pretty
neutral. Right now we raise the pH to about 9.4 to get the carbonate hardness out. With soda ash, we got to get the non-carbonate, which is the hard hardness, to get out of water. We'll be raising it up over 11 to 11.4, and that some of the improvements you saw was a new recarbonation system, one size big enough to handle, to be able to take it from 11. Ideal pH to hit our distribution is 8.4, and that's not going to change, but there will be. If we keep the pH and the alkalinity about where they're at, we don't expect any major issues.
Sure.
So do we discharge an alkaline water into the
into
the Redwood River then?
No, by the time it comes to the treatment plant, we're in that 7.2, 7.3 range.
How do you neutralize it? How do you get the pH from 8 plus to 7?
Just going through the system.
It's the combination.
So it's just off gases and buffers itself?
We get lower pHs from some industries and get higher pHs from some, so it just balances itself out.
And also we're a river town, so we have a lot of dead ends. And just as water sits in pipes, the acidity yes, because we always try to keep our dead ends above 7, obviously.
Thank you.
And Brad, maybe you can mention the issue with the grant application too, and the
right. So last Tuesday we had a tour at the water treatment plant. Quite a few of your staff joined us there, and our engineer from AE2S, Grant Meyer, led a tour along with Jeff of what is being proposed here, and it was summarized financially up there. I think in your handouts there's also a brochure-looking thing that describes the improvement. We had, as Bob mentioned, we had applied to the state PSIG grant program this year that actually scored our project very well, but they ran out of grant money before they got to funding us. When we checked in with the people at the MPCA, Bill Dunn, he indicated that to have the highest likelihood of funding for the next cycle a year from now, if you had your project certified, that's all you could do. That'd be the highest chances of you getting funded. To become certified, we have to have it designed. So we asked our engineering firm what would it cost to design it. That's that $815,000 figure that is proposed. You have a resolution in your packet. The ask this evening is that the council consider the adoption of this resolution. Last Tuesday evening, the MMU Commission voted to proceed to design it contingent upon the City Council's show of support by adopting this resolution. So we're here this evening to talk about the resolution, the financing, the chemistry, whatever else Council would like to talk about.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you. Questions? David?
Brad, a couple of questions. if we proceed in the way that's proposed, can the engineering firm get that design completed so that it fits the timing for the consideration of the next PSIG grants?
If we green light it fairly soon, yes,
Okay.
they can meet the timing.
Okay, and obviously they understand the timing and they're prepared to
Right.
make that work.
They are.
Okay.
And the preliminary design, rough design is done. The conceptual design is done. That's represented in that brochure that was attached. So that now they got to get into the detailed design. And once it's done and approved locally by our commission, then it's got to go to the Minnesota Department of Health, where their engineers review it and they have to approve it. Once it's approved, then it's certified. We do not have to bid at that point in time. At that point in time, we'll have a very good, what I'm going to call a pre-design, a pre-bid final estimate. I'll come back to the city council. I'll show you what that is. At that point in time, we should also know what we anticipate for our grant. And only when the council's ready to go, the grants are received, hopefully, the bids are competitive and they look good, would this thing move forward. That speaks to a provision within the resolution on the second page where the resolution says after the PSC grant amounts are known and the final project estimates are developed, if the amount of the city's commitment is greater than 150% of what it currently is estimated at, or 1.715 million, the city reserves the right to request the Immigrant Commission not award the contract to construct. So that's in there, so you have some bookends on the commitment.
Thank you for that. And then the second question, in a very different part of this, there's language about one of the mitigation options, it sounded like this would be prospectively in the future, would be for consumers to adjust the setting of their softeners to the, quote, most efficient level. Is that something that could be done now and would produce a benefit, or is that more of a contingent scenario?
Right now, with us having the water coming into the homes at 35 grains, you're going to need it set where it's at now to give your people using the water in the home what they want.
So this would only matter if that number were lower coming into the house. Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep.
I do have a question, pretty simple. What happens if we don't do anything? I mean, that has not been addressed. So what happens if we just stay as we are?
Well, that's a question for Glenn and Bob, I believe.
Ben, what you can talk about non-compliance.
When April of 2024 comes around, we would be definitely out of compliance with our NPDS permit. At that point, they can start issuing notices of violation. I don't know what the ultimate would be. I don't think they're going to shut our water off, but do you have any idea, Craig, of what would?
I'm far enough removed from the actual compliance and enforcement on the wastewater side, but typically what happens is Bob's exactly right. They'll continue to increase the pressure through enforcement action until the city decides that it's more expensive to violate than it is to comply. And it's a stick and a carrot, and right now they're offering us a carrot. And as we've looked in the reviews, it's a really attractive carrot. Brad did the breakdown along with Kelly from Bolton and Manx earlier, and Bob, and talked about the fact that if we put this whole thing through and we look at it not just as a source reduction at the water treatment plant, but look at what this affords us in our wastewater piece, because we're also looking at modifications and upgrades there. If this all falls into place and we're able to get the grant, and I know that's not what your question was, Jim, but we could actually decrease the rates in Marshall potentially between water and wastewater with this whole package together. That's the best world scenario. Compliance piece of it, they've been pretty aggressive with, up till now, with their watershed permits and looking at it whole watershed, or what they call TMDL, and looking at it by stream reach. And if I had to look at the tea leaves and the crystal ball, I'd say they're pretty serious about it.
That's what I'm trying to get an answer. So the public realizes as we vote for this, what is the other end if we do nothing? I know there's been talk of, and I'm all for clean water. I'm all for this, but I need the citizens of Marshall understand if we don't do this, what is the consequences?
Yeah, and I think that the key thing with this is the timing right now is, and I mean, what's being proposed here is a pretty good chunk of money to put up to do the engineering. There needs to be work done at the filter plant, and there's going to be work that needs to be done at the wastewater plant. We need this engineering. The key thing is really, we could probably, if we don't get the grant, can we delay a little bit to put funding in place? Absolutely. Are the plans still good? I can't speak for the Department of Health, but certainly they are. That part of the structure and the requirements don't change that quickly. So this is really, the hurry that we have right now is to try to attain the grant for 2018.
And then the second side of my question would be, is education. I think I've chatted with folks about this. There's a lot of old softeners out there where people just automatically set them every night because that's what they've done for the last 40 years. So what part of this is MMU goes to is education. What expense to convince people not to use their softeners, that our system is now good?
Yeah, I envision actually maybe contracting with some of the local softener companies to individually go into homes and offer to review their softeners, their settings, and things like that. If we go through this water plant and we got the soft water and nobody changes their settings, we're still getting all the salt into us. So that's going to be definitely a large part. And there will be a lot of public education with this. And that would be my first suggestion of trying to get the largest reduction is getting contracted with somebody to go in and start checking these things.
And I think that's a great point. And looking at what MMU has done, even just with the conversion in electric use, and looking at Energy Star appliances, and then also the lighting piece with the LED and those conversions. And I think that's been very effective. I think there's a lot of homeowner envy for residents in Marshall when they figure out what's going on, and I applaud MMU for those efforts, and I think that's exactly it. I think it's on us, it's on the utility and everything to continue to put the word out about why we're doing this and what the benefit is, and that it does affect a savings in both hauling the salt up and down the steps and doing that work. But that's real dollars to people. That salt isn't free either, and I know that when I first came to town here, it was 700 pounds per person per day. The numbers in 1991, I think, Bob, when the waste load allocation study was done, at that point in time, there were times that Marshall was putting out over 700 at the outfall, and the in-stream condition was always bad. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
One thing we should mention is we won't go forward without the grant. That's an important part. We'll be doing the upfront work to get the plans and specs ready to go, but it wouldn't be feasible to go forward with a $9 to $10 million improvement and not have the grant. And that's where the carrot comes forward. And if we say, what happens if we don't do it? Well, if we have the opportunity with the state funding and we would say, no, we aren't going to do it, there's a lot bigger chance of the stick coming than if we've been doing the work with the department all along.
Very well.
So and for them to be providing that $7 million of money, that's where this process all hinges upon, is to meet our limits using state funds to help us.
And I think it's fair to say that when the PCA and the watershed group looks at these projects, they're looking at who has the capability to partner in and make a difference in the Redwood River and in the Minnesota River and then in the Mississippi River. And that's what they're looking at. They are looking at the cascading watershed impacts. So they're picking those targets of where can we do this and get the most bang for the buck, because the other smaller communities that have stabilization pond systems or other methods of treating don't do other than to disinfect their input water. They have to grab these where they can, and that's why Marshall's in a really good position right now to take advantage of the carrot.
Just to jump in here, one of the things that we want to keep in mind, and part of the education to the citizens, and where is it as much beneficial for them. If you take a look at your 13,000 pounds of salt, going back, that's 260 bags, 50-pound bags that we go dump in the river every day. And I've just taken a number of about $4 a bag, which may be even on the cheap side. That's over $1,000 a day that the citizens of Marshall are throwing into the river. And we really, that's something that we're going to avoid.
Our engineer actually put the pencil to that, because there's two sides to this project. There's raising the capital, and then there's having enough operating revenue to operate the additional softening. We've quantified, I apologize, your numbers were stated in CCF, 100 cubic feet. We've converted to units of 1,000 gallons. But, yeah, so thank you, Bob. Jeff, am I saying this right? It's going to be $1.44 per 1,000 gallons additional cost. That's the surcharge that is talked about in the resolution. We can net against that the reduction in salt. And I think our engineer estimated about 40 cents.
I think it was 62 cents at CCF, so it would be about 25% more than
Okay.
that.
So the water's going to cost more, but it's a better product. You know, how many times do your plumbing fixtures get fouled up and sometimes have to be replaced because of the water hardness that we currently are delivering, 35 grains? I'm thinking that when we have 5 to 8 grains hardness, and that's our goal, plumbing fixtures are going to last longer, that type of thing. So,
Water heaters.
Water heaters potentially will last longer, right?
I have a few questions here. One, you mentioned that the surcharge will be $1.44 per 1,000 gallons. So for the average person then, what would they see as a monthly increase in their bill?
The average family of 4 uses about 6,000 gallons a month if they don't irrigate.
Okay. And you were talking too about as far as the rating, as far as who gets the grant money. And I would think that normally they would give grant money where they think it's needed the most, where they're having the greatest discharge into the river system or whatever. So are we kind of one of them that's discharging more than a lot of
us as getting a good bang for their buck?
Yeah, so we are, even in, not that, by being certified that helps us, but also because we're a high dumper of chloride into the river, that makes us even better as a choice then.
We scored a 68 on their point scale. That's not a means tested rating system. I can't exactly explain all their factors, but a year ago 68 was funded. Okay, a year goes by, there's more projects, and it's a function of how much money is the legislature going to provide for this program. That has to happen too. That's a huge variable in this. So,
well, and the other factor, and you may want to comment on this too, but we're discharging into the Redwood River at times of the year that has fairly low flow, especially in the winter time, and that then discharges into Lake Redwood, which has a whole other probably restricted level of regulations that go with it before it goes into the Minnesota rivers.
Even if we do this, we're still going to need softeners then, but not use as much salt as...
I think today it'd be hard pressed to find anybody who did not have a softener. If we do this project, say 10 years beyond that, I think you're going to find a pretty good percentage of people that won't have a softener at 5 to 8 grains hardness. Now, I know my family's preferences, they're going to probably still soften a little bit. That's just a preference. But I think there'll be some people that will not soften.
Just two other quick ones here. The limit is 261, and if we do this, supposedly we're going to go down to 180. Are we doing more than we need to, and is it costing us to go down even lower than the 261?
Now, those are all projections there, and with it's a perfect scenario if we can get everybody to tune their softeners down. That's the estimate of 180. We don't know for sure if we're going to be there or not. We would have the ability at the water treatment plant, correct me if I'm right, if 5 grains is too soft and it's costing us a lot more, we could back that off to 7 grains or 8 grains probably and tweak it that way to get the most bang for our buck for the softening.
And then my last question was about the accuracy of the estimates. I mean, are we very certain that these estimates are pretty accurate? Because we're spending a large amount of money, and if we spend the money and it doesn't come out the way we want, we may have wasted some money. So are we really confident in the numbers?
Sure. So the estimates that AE2S prepared for us were developed in 2019 dollars. So I have confidence in the estimates. I'm also anxious to get into the bidding environment because I believe we might have a competitive bidding environment. So we're anxious to see where that goes to.
You're talking chemistry-wise?
Well, I'm talking both ways, as far as costs and as far as the chemistry part of it.
We're fairly confident in the chemistry. We've had 2 different engineering firms, mostly A2, has to look at it from the water side. But
that's a good point.
Value engineered sort of by Bolton & Mink also.
Bolton & Mink, which is a city engineer firm, they reviewed this all, and they've been working together back and forth on this. So, yeah, we are confident in this in the estimates.
Okay, that's important. Thank you.
Other questions?
The other piece too is, talking about, well, do we have to go this far? You guys are blending water right now from multiple sources to kind of manage where we're at, and you could certainly continue to do that and run one that's more favorable through the softener and bring the less favorable back if we wanted to blend up a few grains.
Yes.
Right.
Trouble is, Craig, our 3 sources don't vary much. The hardness is there pretty much
right
on all of them.
That's all I did. Just wanted to make one point as to your question. We did survey the softening people, and we were actually surprised. The question we asked is, traditional softeners, as you were talking about, were either a metered head or high efficiency, and it was 70 to 90% already have either a metered head or high efficiency, just because the cost benefit is already there for most people. So hopefully there won't be a whole lot of whole softener changeouts. There would be some, but.
Any other questions? Thank you all for a very thorough presentation. We have the resolution in support of the chloride reduction water discharge to the Redwood River. That resolution is before you. Are there questions about that resolution?
I'll make a motion to accept the resolution.
Second.
By Jim, seconded by Steve. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll now move to agenda item number 14. Excuse me, agenda item number 13. This is consider the resolution awarding the sale of the General Obligation Series 2017B bonds. Carla Drown, our finance director, will introduce this topic, and Terry from Springsteads is also with us.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The City of Marshall has authorized sale of bonds, and tonight with us we have Terry Heaton to go over the results of the sale of those bonds for various projects.
Welcome, Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. Today I'm here to provide some good news, and that is that you had a great day in the market with the bond sale. The City Council had authorized on going forward with $4,435,000 of general obligation bonds, and the yellow papers handed out this evening are everyone get one? The results of that sale. So there were 6 bids that are listed, and it represents, because of syndicate bids where there are multiple underwriters coming together, represents 33 financial institutions. So that's a lot of interest from the market. And part of that, well, actually, a lot of that has to do with your very high credit rating, AA from S&P. And that's, when you get in the AA categories, that's well received. The low bid came from UMB Bank, and they are the first entity listed under the bidders. And over on the far right side, the true interest rate is 2.14%, and these are for bonds that go out to 2033. Our estimate about a month ago when we presented this was 2.38, and so that's about 0.25% or 24 basis points less than our estimate. So the market did move favorably. We've seen other sales coming in by quite a bit less than our estimate as well. So I have to give credit to Carla because she picked the date of the sale. So congratulations. The other thing is the bids were rounded down, and so instead of selling, the resolution will say instead of $4,435,000, the actual amount in the resolution is $4,430,000, 5,000 less. So it was a great day in the market. The credit report that you received this time, again, you got it rated by Standard & Poor's, and it was very similar to last time and had the same positive things to say. It was almost identical, and we went over it in June again, but to suffice it to say that The things that they're looking at again is the weak economy. Growing that economy has always been listed. That you're at 91.4% of the national level. The things that you can control, you have strong management, good financial policies, adequate performance on your budgets. The general fund came out ahead, or there was a slight deficit, in the general fund, but overall all of your funds came out positively. Very strong budgetary flexibility, very strong liquidity. And then they always note that you have weak debt, but that 85.5% of your debt will be retired within 10 years. So aggressively paying off today's costs with today's dollars. So it's another very good report card from S&P. And I think with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
And thank you, Terry. Any questions? Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you.
As well as city staff, and in particular Carla as finance director. Any questions? If not, you have the resolution awarding the sale.
I move the resolution.
Approval.
Motion by Craig, seconded by David. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. We'll move then to agenda item number 15. Agenda item number 15 is consider the renewal of the agreement between Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce and the City of Marshall for services at the Merit Center. So, Cal.
Should we move this further out? Yeah.
This is back to the Ben days when he always said, I'll get you on right away, and then I'm almost last.
I don't think that was a compliment.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing us to come back. And what I thought we would do mostly tonight is if you had any opportunity to look through, we showed a lot of different documents, a bunch of contracts, and a lot of the information that Darren shared was kind of really a synopsis of what's going on there. And just the highlights, again, of the contracts, and I'll talk first about the Merit Center one. And Rob, if you've got anything to add, you're certainly welcome to come up. Nothing really has changed other than in both contracts that we gave you, the red line version took some of the language and changed it to a little simpler version, took a few of the here's what we do versus here's what you do language and simplified that, took some of the steps out. And that's, as I mentioned, it's kind of a work in progress. It's really, we're still buttoning up some of, how can this work better with Darren working with Rob and working with the new director there, Jasmine. You'll probably see some different iterations of that as the years go by to a point where maybe this contract would not be needed and the Merit Center would actually do that work on their own. So specifically on the Merit Center, we'll answer any questions. If anything that Rob can answer or Darren can answer or I can answer, we'd be more than happy.
Okay, thank you, Cal. Questions? Not. Is there a motion on the renewal of the agreement? And I'd also add this was discussed thoroughly at the work session last week. So.
I move approval of the agreement.
I'll second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
Yeah, I know. I'll be in there. Just wait. Don't freak out. There. Not bad, huh?
And the motion does pass. So agenda item number 16, similar action. This is considered the renewal of the agreement between Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce and the City of Marshall for services at the Schwann Regional Amateur Sports Center. Once again, Cal.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. The highlights for that one, the actual dollar amounts haven't changed. Obviously, the dates changed. We did a similar red line version here, just for your convenience, so they could see some of the changes in the contract. This one had a few more actual changes on this is what the CVB or the Chamber does versus this is what the city does. And that's happened through a series of meetings with all of the different players at City Hall and the CVB and the Chamber, just to see how we can really make a better system for those people going in the system trying to book a room or trying to book an event. And that's gone from being a little bit shaky a year ago to what I would consider partway there. Still needs a little bit of work, and we had pretty extensive conversation during the work session on that piece of it. And John, actually, you brought up it's still somewhat cumbersome. We've had some discussion since then on how we further define that, and actually have made some improvements since the contract. So, same thing we would ask for the renewal of this contract.
Thank you. Are there questions?
Make a motion to approve the contract.
Motion by John. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Craig. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Thank you. Agenda item number 17 is to consider the approval of the purchase of a arch to be located at the entryway of the amateur sports complex. With us tonight, Preston Sinsrud from the Parks Department. Preston?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight, the action in front of you is one of the 3 things left remaining to fulfill the master plan out the amateur sports complex. The archway will be down by the north end near the parking lot. As you're walking up to the ball fields, it's going to be about 12 to 14 feet wide, and it'll be tall enough that you could drive a truck and service vehicle through there also, so we don't create an issue as far as access. We did receive 2 quotes from both local fabricators. Marshall Machine Shop was at $23,000. They did have tax on there, but we're tax exempt, so it'd just be the 23. And then Benderite submitted a quote of not to exceed $10,000. The arch will match all of our existing arches in town, or similar. They won't be the same, just the design will be a little different, but the same general character, color. There'll be, might say Marshall across the top or something like that, but it'll carry all the same themes of what we've been doing for the last few years.
The Benderite quote is substantially lower. Does any other commitments in terms of recognition, or is there donation involved there? Or?
Nope. He was going to lower the price more for a possible trade for naming rights to a field, but he decided just to leave it as is for now. So there could be potential. We talked about sometime maybe the 2 North Championship fields putting an arch on the scoreboards. He said he might consider a possible trade for that at another time once we had like a package put together. So.
Thank you. Questions for Preston? Again, thank you for your work on this.
Yep. Thank you.
Wishes of the council.
I move motion to approve the request for the funding the arch.
Second.
Motion by John, seconded by Craig, to approve the purchase of the arch to be located at the entryway at Amateur Sports Complex and accept the low responsible bid from Benderite Fabrication of Marshall. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
When the whole Red Baron Arena got built and it was sponsored, and there's prohibitions on who can advertise, who can't advertise, why can't we get them to just buy the arch completely? I mean, you're losing a lot of money on advertisement with those prohibitions that are built in.
And Scott, you may want to address that and whether or not that's applicable to the ball field or only the arena building.
Two separate discussions, Councilman Meyer.
2 separate discussions?
Yeah. I mean, when the initial project was put together with the arena, it could have been framed that way, but now it's 2 separate discussions in terms of fundraising, sponsorship, those types of things, in terms of the 2 entities that you're talking about, the Amateur Sports Complex, which is where the arch will go, and the Red Baron Arena.
So in other words, there are not the restrictions that I think you're referring to.
Yeah.
Okay. Other questions or discussion on the motion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 18. Agenda item number 18, consider which actually was removed from the agenda. So we'll move then to agenda item number 19. Consider the resolution for traffic control signage in the Tree Street neighborhood. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If you want to bring up the proposed signing, we have a description. The review was initiated by a resident in the area located along North Minnesota Street. And so we went out and took a look at the entire area and identified the two major, well, actually there's three major routes on this map. One is North
Bruce Street.
North Bruce Street, North Hill Street, and North, can't read it from here.
Whitney.
Whitney, okay. Those were the major identified routes, and we recommended that we put up the stop controls on adjacent streets coming into those routes. The one change on North Whitney was the change from a yield to a stop. Yield signs, in my opinion, don't provide any traffic control at all. People get used to them and they just go through them, whether there's a traffic control there or not. And then we added the red stop sign locations on the adjacent streets to North Hill Street. We would recommend approval.
Questions?
Glenn?
Yes.
That seems like a lot of stop signs. Is this any more concentrated than other neighborhoods would be, or?
Not with major routes going through them, no.
So this
the minor route is normally stopped.
Have we heard much from the neighborhood as far as whether they like the idea of stop signs or opposed to it?
No, we had a discussion at the Planning Commission too about them. Was no other input.
They actually wanted more than their original request, right?
Right. They wanted them all up and down. Minnesota? Yeah, Minnesota.
One time I lived in this neighborhood where there was no stop signs, and it was not, I would say, safe area at the time. I think this is a good proposal to stop there.
It's adjacent to the school as well.
I remember we requested, my wife and I requested the stop sign on, I think it's Hudson to Box Elder, because there wasn't one there.
No.
And one of our kids just about got smugged. That old now, so 20 years ago.
We did it mostly for consistency of signing, so that sometimes, you don't really think about what's there. You come up and you either stop or you go, depending upon what you've always done. And if you missed the street one way or the other, and there was no traffic control, or there was traffic control and you blew through it, that's what we look for along these three routes, was consistency of the neighborhood.
Did you say Planning Commission or did you say Transportation Committee?
It's Transportation Committee.
PINT. We
PINT.
heard it on September 13th.
Okay.
Yeah, PINT, I'm sorry.
Just a comment, one of the things you brought up, this was brought up by a citizen. I guess I'd just make the comment that I'd like to thank citizen for doing that, because we don't have the staff that can go roaming around checking how safe it is. This is the idea we really want, to have the citizens take part and bring a suggestion to the city. Maybe we can't do them all, but I really like to, whoever this is, say thank you to them for doing this. I appreciate their input on this, because we can't be there everywhere. That's great.
Very good. Any other questions?
On that note, I would move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Craig. Discussion. If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 20. Agenda item number 20, consider the resolution to provide restricted parking on alternate sides of Hamden Street. Glenn.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. And this was also reviewed by the PINT committee. It's a narrow street. There's a section that narrows the south end of it even further by about 6 more feet. So it's really not adequate for parking on both sides if you want to have 2 lanes of traffic. So the alternative is there was 2 alternatives talked about: prohibiting parking on both sides, or alternating parking on one side or the other. And the recommendation is for the department to provide alternate sides of for parking. And then Councilmember Wazinski just brought an example to me about alternate parking in Superior, Wisconsin. That's a real interesting concept where in our other alternating parking areas, we go on a daily basis. So if you recall the parking lots uptown where one side of the parking lot is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the other is Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday for alternate parking. This one uses a week at a time for no parking on one side for a week and no parking on the other side the following week. That allows both snow removal and street sweeping to be done on a weekly basis rather than a daily basis. We haven't really talked about this too much, but the only problem that we can see is when you get significant snowfalls and you can't clean that one side for a week. Okay, because you're asked to park on that one side. We do have most of our equipment now that has articulating blades on the front. So when it's the no parking side, you move all the snow over to the one side. Okay, up to the cars that are parked on the other side. The other side, you dig your way out for a week. Okay, so that's okay. You just so you know that you have to dig your way out for that week. Then the following week, we snowplow that side. If you get snowfalls within that week, we'll take it to the other side. So there might be some concern that it's all going to one side. Well, no, it's not. The snow will be split. It'll just be split by the week rather than by the day. We were intending to do the every other day thing, but we're open to the suggestions of alternating weeks. My only caveat is if you wait for a week to remove the snow on the one side, you might have some issues.
So in that example, how is that signed?
That's commercial really on one side and residential on the other on this street.
Right. No, I mean the week.
Oh, a week is every other week. There was odd weeks. You actually get a calendar that says where you park. But the other thing is if most of the people are parking on that side, that's the side you'd park on. You know, you wouldn't probably even have to look at what the date is. If there's 15 cars parked on one side, you're probably not going to, oh, there's an opening on the other side. You probably, if you have restricted parking.
It's actually done for, it's in front of my daughter's house that this is done in Superior, Wisconsin. Yeah. If Sunday falls on the 1st, you park on the outside of the street. The next Sunday is on the 8th, so you move on to the even side of the street. And then Sunday is the freebie day where they flip their cars around. So Sunday is the only day you may have cars on both sides of the street.
We generally don't.
And we don't sweep.
Or remove snow unless it's emergency.
You also, listen, if we do every other night, you're still going to have cars on both sides, so when do you move the cars? And then you have police ticketing cars. Wow, it was a Tuesday, Wednesday. Here it's pretty simple. Sunday you flip your car over. I think it'll save our staff time, money, and effort. It'll save our police force time of giving tickets. And, you know, Superior gets a lot of snow and it's worked there. I mean, they get a lot more than we do in Marshall. They just always wing the snow one way, so technically your car will never get plowed in either.
And we don't have, you know, exactly how it's to be signed. I'm okay for trying that in that neighborhood is alternating weeks if we give out the calendars, because the odd and even weeks don't correspond to odd and even days at the beginning of the week. Okay, so it's kind of you have to have a calendar.
Glenn, now it seems like there's commercial on one side and then apartments on the other side, right?
Yes.
Now the commercial, most of them are, I mean, I assume they're facing College Drive. And some of them have parking lots. And so what I'm wondering is the need for parking more for the residents of the apartments? And
well, it's both, because the employees generally park in the back.
But they could park in the parking lots, and they could park on the other side of the street.
Very
I guess
few
I'm
of them
thinking,
have parking lots. The property line comes almost to the buildings.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess I'll say there's probably as much need for parking on each side, but I don't think the residents in the apartments would care if they parked on the other side of the street either.
what I'm wondering too is, I mean, is it that much work to walk across the street? Instead of having it on your side, you have to park on the other side and walk. I mean,
no.
I just think, are we creating a lot of confusion by going back and forth and having papers that show on this day you're supposed to park here and another day you're supposed to park over there? Why not just say parking on one side and not the other? And it's just a lot simpler. And we're not talking about walking a big distance for anybody.
No, it would be for cleaning.
What's that?
It would be for cleaning.
For cleaning, but I mean,
right.
To me, it creates a lot of confusion.
And I think it's less confusion if you did it by the week rather than by the day.
And I understand in Marshall we don't do this, Glenn. My wife being from the Iron Range, Dr. Marsh probably from Cloquet, this is very customary up there because they're narrow roads. It costs money to cover taconite. So this is something Virginia, Evelyn, Superior, Duluth, they have been doing for 30, 40 years. And once people get used to it, it becomes fairly easy because I think there's other spots that we need to look at doing something like this with narrow roads too.
And I've seen that. I've lived in the Twin Cities for a while, and you know, when there's snow removal, there's certain days you have to be on one side of the street or the other side of the street for snow removal. But that's only when you have a snowstorm and have snow problems. But the rest of the time, you park wherever you want to.
This is mainly done for narrow roads, for safety, getting fire trucks down is what it is done for. But it's very common up in northern Minnesota with the narrow roads.
Just a question, I guess. Has there been any conversation or any notification to the people that live on the street that we're having this discussion?
No.
I guess that, to me, that's probably a bigger concern.
We had the public notification of the PINT in the paper. That's
yeah, I guess, to me, I'm hesitant in taking any action on this, honestly, because, you know, without giving any input by the citizens out there, one way or the other, if they have any preference, if they have, you know, is there a reason not to? I understand, and I know it's a narrow street, and I understand the need for doing this, but just the process of doing this and you know, moving ahead without some type of notification, and that may come from discussion, hopefully out of media or whatever, that Independent makes a little notation, you know, big headline, city argues over parking issues. I don't care, whatever you do to them.
Councilman Kramer is insisting.
Well, we could do that.
Parking.
I guess to me,
on Hamden Street.
Could be worse.
Outside.
I would like to. I guess to me, my preference would be to table this till our next meeting, just giving time for the residents to have some input in this. I'm not saying I'm for or against it anyway. I just would like to have some input from.
Mayor, would it be in order to? I had a similar thought that we defer this and then have a public hearing with some notification to the residents.
Do we want the owners notified or the residents?
Both.
Yeah. Well,
I don't have addresses for every one of those residents in those apartments.
Well, I know, and I'm not. I guess public hearing to me is one thing. I think it's a good idea, but it's kind of a, you know, how do you make the official notification? To me, I'm just saying, if we get it out in the paper, we're having this discussion, it's going to affect your parking, do that. So
it's an opportunity for public input.
Right. Yeah.
We could also have it on our website, Glenn.
I totally agree with you as far as giving people
I'll
notice.
make a motion to table this discussion until our next meeting.
And I'll second that with the, if it's agreeable, with the proviso that we intend to hold a public hearing to facilitate that input.
Well,
can we do it that way, Mayor?
Well, hold on a second. The public input for future action is one thing. Whether or not we want to formalize it as a public hearing which could complicate notification.
Just make it as requesting input from public hearing.
Could I pursue that point for a minute? How would a public hearing complicate notification?
But I believe, Glenn, you said that you had the addresses of the property owners, but not necessarily the residents.
Okay, well, so with that, just a moment, Glenn. With that is, we've had public hearings before on matters of citywide interest that did not involve an address-specific notification. So I'm just wondering, you're seeing this as a different matter here?
Glenn?
Do you want to? That's the issue. Do you want to give specific written notice to each owner or to each resident?
I think your point is that
We don't
that
have
would be
to.
required, but have a public hearing so there is
Just,
actually.
I think this, by making it more formal, it gives it a higher visibility. I think we do these appropriate notifications.
I think that's fine. And to clarify, and I'll get to you, to clarify the motion, then you want to restate your motion for this.
Make a motion to table this discussion until our next meeting and have a means for public input, put it that way. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Glenn.
Okay. Well,
Now discussion on the motion.
my concern is, and I totally agree that we should let the people know that are going to be affected by this. And my thought is you just notify the property owners. I mean, you got businesses along there and you got the apartment owners, and the apartment owners can let the people in the apartment house know about it. And it'll be a public meeting, and anyone can come to our next council meeting to discuss this. So it'll be open to the public, and those that care enough and want to have some input can come to that. But certainly the apartment owners, I think, would be interested in what happens as far as parking because it affects their residents, and they can do they can post signs and and print brochures and so forth and say there's a hearing if you want to go to it, or a council meeting if you want to go to it. You can voice your input as to where you think the parking should be. But I would like them to know that what the options are that we're talking about, whether it's rotating daily, weekly, or just having parking on one side and not the other. I'd like to hear which of those options that they would like best, because they're the ones that are going to be affected by it.
I think it's important, and if we're going to do this, that we should provide a format of the intent that we can give to the apartment owners that they could print and post so that they're getting the same information. I know that I think the biggest impact here is probably going to be the early morning business operators that use the back of their buildings that are along Hamden Street for parking. I think the residents, I think like Councilman Lozinski says, they'll get pretty used to this piece. I think the part is going to be for more of the business side, and I'm all about having the public's input on it, but I think we have to be careful about how we're asking for that, and I think, again, providing a uniform format that the apartment buildings can post either at their entrances or what have you, just to explain what and why.
Any other discussion on the motion? If not, we do have the substitute motion, and we will move to a vote. Motion passes. This time I'll call for a 5-minute recess.
I talked and
that I've ever met.
I'll reconvene the meeting. We'll move to agenda item number 21. Agenda item number 21 is consider the resolution approving the preliminary tax levy for 2017 collectible in 2018, and agenda item number 22 will be consider the preliminary budget for 2018. With us tonight, Carla Drown, Finance Director, to walk us through a bit of this. And of course, by state law, we're required to adopt the preliminary tax levy for 2017 collectible in 2018 by the end of September, and then we can not exceed that. We can work it down, but not exceed that in the continuation of our budget discussions. Carla?
That is correct. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We've got a PowerPoint that we're going to go through first, and then if you have any questions as we go, please. So right here, what you're looking at is on the left-hand side, you have the levy dollars, so where our levy would be set. On the right-hand side is the tax rate, what the taxpayers pay. Let me get my notes. So the orange line there is the $100,000 home. So at a $100,000 home, if the tax rate was increased by 3.3%, the taxpayer would pay an additional $13 a year. The gray line is a $150,000 home, and I'm looking at the far right there. So the orange line is $401. The gray line is $705. That would be an increase of $22 a year. And on a $300,000 home, it's $1,619, which is a $53 increase for the year. So the blue line then is actually the tax levy. Currently, we are at $6,142,075. If we do the increase, the first, I should go back, the pay at 0%, there is an increase in tax levy, and that is your tax capacity. So our tax capacity is increased, therefore increasing the overall levy amount to $6,241,364. To get to that additional 3.3% tax rate increase, we're getting an additional $207,814, which brings us to a tax levy of $6,449,178. Whoops, wrong way. Okay, there we go. All right, so here you're looking at the number of homes in each range. So the orange, the largest there at the bottom, is your $100,000 home to $200,000 home. And with that, if you remember, I said on the previous slide, the $100,000 home is going to see approximately a $13 a year increase with that 3.3%. And here we're looking at the commercial. Same concept as the residential, with the tax levy dollars on the left-hand side and the tax rate on the right-hand side. So if you look at the orange line, that's a $150,000 commercial property with a 3.3% tax rate increase again. It's $41 a year. For the $500,000 commercial, which is the gray line, with a 3.3%, it's $5,166 or $166 a year increase. And the $3 million commercial, which is your yellow line, would be looking at $1,067 a year increase. Of the commercial properties, your largest portion of that is the 0 to 250,000. And on the previous slide, the $150,000 is approximately a $41 a year increase for them. Who pays our taxes? 50% of it comes from our commercial industrial. The other 50%, almost 50%, is your residentials. And then you've got the 4% other, which is your ag line. How your 2017 tax dollar was spent: 63 cents is on general fund. You have 19 cents on debt service, the blue. Then the other large area is 10 cents on the library, 6 cents on capital equipment, and 2 cents on our EDA. With the 3.3% increase, we're recommending a 2018 preliminary tax levy of $6,449,178. Do we have any questions?
Thank you, Carla. Questions?
Now, the amount you gave it, and here is $6,142,000 was last year. Was that was the actual levy and not the preliminary?
That is our actual levy for 2017.
Do you have an idea what the preliminary one? Because the preliminary is always higher than, usually higher than the actual, isn't it? Or well, can't be less.
Not necessarily.
So,
I believe it was very close to the same last year.
So it's not like there's a drastic increase in the preliminary levy. It's close to what it was last year.
It is.
So we really can't compare the actual to the preliminary. We should compare the preliminary to the preliminary, then maybe.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. And again, one last comment. I mean, we can always go down, but we can't go up if
that
something
is correct.
happens.
I would also make a comment. First off, thank you, Carla, for that that presentation. That's a different way of looking at it than what we've looked at in other years. So thank you for that. And I also think it's interesting the slide that you had as far as where the tax contributions come from. That it's broken out so evenly that residential is important, but commercial and industrial is half of our tax capacity, which leads to why both are important. Residential is important, but also what we do to encourage continued economic development, that's also important too. Other questions for Carla? So then let's move then to questions about the resolution. That would be our preliminary tax levy for 2017. Any questions about that resolution?
I move the resolution.
Second.
Motion by Craig, seconded by David. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
What did you do?
That motion does pass. Agenda item number 22. This would be to consider the resolution adopting the preliminary 2018 budget. So Carla, comments and recognizing that there's still additional work to do on this to bring this in line with the preliminary levy.
There is still work to do on this budget. Setting the preliminary levy, we don't know for sure where it's going to go, so we know we have a little wiggle room, but I feel very confident that we can come into a balanced budget. We do have a little, like Mayor said, work to do. Preliminarily, we have $11.6 million in revenues, which is an increase of about $525,000. And the expenses are currently at 12.3 million, which is an increase currently of about 1.163 million from 2017. So the revenues is currently under expenses by $650,506 for 2018. Like I had said, staff feel very confident that we can work together and get this into a balanced budget by the end of the year.
Thank you, Carla. Question for Carla? If not, are there questions about the resolution that would adopt a preliminary 2018 budget? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
So move.
Motion by Craig.
Second.
Second by John. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Motion passes. Agenda item number 23 is Commission Board Liaison Reports. Actually, mine have not met since we last met. Craig?
I don't believe any of mine have met since our last meeting. If they did, I wasn't there.
Okay, Steve?
ED did meet, and we talked about budgetary stuff. There was a couple of other items regarding Ralco and True Shrimp, and just hoping to develop those and get those moving. Again, to reiterate what you said, very important to make our community attractive to business and get people in, and that's what we really need to do. So.
Glenn?
I wasn't able to attend the Housing Commission meeting, and the Planning Commission item was on the agenda tonight. So.
Very good. John?
The utilities did meet, and we had an earlier discussion here that covered most of it. So I think that there was a tour, like Brad had mentioned, tour of the water treatment facility. So it was interesting to see. Went through the areas that need the repair, but also a lot of discussion on the proposed changes that would come in place. Councilman Meister talked about the EDA, covered that. We did have a meeting today of the municipal building discussion that continued on. Really confirmed the consensus that we need to stay in that building and work to remodel it. We are moving ahead and towards requests from 3 different professional services to come back with some proposals to us for in about 5 weeks would be our next meeting. Give them some time to put some proposals together and to include with that ideas or thoughts on Marshall Hotel. And just throw this in one time, could be this or on our next council item, that I think the council does need to take some time here to have some discussion along with that on what should be done, could be done with the Marshall Hotel, so that when this recommendation does come back, that everybody's pretty much on the same level and knowing what we can do, what we can't do, and then we can decide what we should do. So I think that's about it.
Okay, thank you, John. David?
September 13th, the PI&T committee met, and we discussed those 2 items here this evening. And on the 21st, the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Yeah.
Marshall Area Transit met. I had a funeral that day, so I couldn't attend the other ones.
Okay, so we'll move on then to agenda item number 24, council member individual items. Craig?
Nothing at this time, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, the only thing that I would have to say is that after our last meeting, I did get feedback from constituents on the special assessment issues, and an awful lot of them were overwhelmingly in favor of setting just a flat fee that goes into things. I didn't hear anybody say that was a bad idea, so I think that at some point in the near future we should address that.
Glenn?
I have nothing.
Jim?
I have nothing.
David?
2 items. On September 20th, I attended a meeting at the courthouse organized by the county auditor treasurer to look at options for the new voting systems that the county will have to make a decision on. They've got a state grant, but there's a certain timeliness to that. And they hope to be able to make a decision by now, but there's a delay in the the certification process by the Secretary of State of one of the vendors, but it was useful information. I was interested in it for my own curiosity, but also in terms of educating myself about the city's role, or the city's part in that process. And a number of the staff, let's see, Jane, Kyle, Doreen, and Sheila were there, so a lot of city involvement in that discussion.
Good. And John?
Nothing more.
Mayor, I'm sorry. Two items I mentioned.
Yes, okay.
Yesterday I had the honor of, in lieu of the mayor's absence, to present his proclamation at the SMSU 50th anniversary party, which the city's official recognition of that milestone for the university.
And David, thank you for filling in for me in your role as President Pro Tem, as I was unavailable that day. So we'll move on then to staff reports. Agenda item number 25, Sheila.
Thank you. The city administrator search process is continuing to make progress. We have 4 candidates coming to Marshall to interview on Monday and Tuesday. Our search consultant has sent interview information to the 2 panelist groups. I believe that came out today. And an open house invitation has either been shared with the public in the newspaper, city website, and email distribution, or will be shortly. I think some of those avenues have already been shared, but we will be doing additional. Our police advisory board will be meeting tomorrow evening to approve an eligibility roster for our detective position. Director Yant will be conducting final interviews for that on Monday, October 2nd, so we would expect a job offer for that position next week. And then yesterday I sent each of you an email update with information related to Director Yant's upcoming leave of absence, which will be for approximately 7 weeks. 5 years ago, when we had a similar situation, an interim police chief was designated to fulfill the police side of Director Yant's duties. That position was offered and accepted yesterday by Sergeant Marshall. So Sergeant Marshall would begin that interim position on October 9th, and we would expect that to conclude on November 27th. The only other thing I had is that we did have a personnel committee scheduled to meet this week. We did not have a quorum, so that has been rescheduled.
Thank you, Sheila. Any questions for Sheila?
Sheila, if I may, Mayor,
yes.
Question. Since this concerns my attendance, was that a police advisory board meeting to be tomorrow or the following Wednesday? It
was rescheduled from next week to this week.
You know, I don't believe I got that information. I'll follow up with Tessa, but that's. Okay. I remember a couple of communications about that. One changed it, and I think we got different information, but I'll check. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Sheila? Not Sheila, thanks for your continued work, outstanding work as interim city administrator. Yeah. Glenn?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We've had a little bit of rain recently that slowed our completion projects down for our asphalt work and striping work, but hopefully they'll get on track again tomorrow. Exciting news, of course, now let Dennis bring you up to date on really the nuts and bolts of it, but we have a contract so that we can do the award of the Midwest contract for the Commerce Industrial Park. That's a huge item that's been going back and forth for 9 months, so I'll let them touch base on what really the process is from now for the next week or so. We also, you know, it's a big deal doing the review of the City Hall renovations as well. That's a big deal to take place. So I think I'll just leave it at that. There's a lot on the plate right now. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Any questions for Glenn? If not, Dennis?
Thank you, Mayor. Council, as Glenn has indicated, the Department of Economic Development, DEED, has been questioning the ownership of property. We've been, apparently since the Housing and Redevelopment Authority is not listed on our website, it doesn't exist. It is now listed on our website, and apparently it does now exist because we got approval today for the $2 million DEED grant for infrastructure, the BDPI grant. That will all be coming out. It's dated, it's effective next Monday, October 2nd. We have gotten in touch with our contractor. It's been indicated that he can start work there on October 3rd. It'll take a couple weeks for mobilization, so we've got documents to review, but we hope to get some work done out in the Commerce Park. that's good news. And then today, the building official received some construction documents for a facility in town that the Islamic Society is attempting to buy and renovate to move their worship facility from the 911 West Main Street to a new location, more suitable in size for their needs. So we hope that will work out as planned. That's kind of some big news for the day.
Okay. Thank you, Dennis. John, do you have a question?
Just a question on Dennis. Actually, part of our discussion in EDA came up. Why do we have an HRA?
I don't know if at one time it was, advantageous some financial way, but you're right, it is at times cumbersome when I think the city council could accomplish the same things as HRA. And so we may need to look at that structural organization. It's always been there since I've been here, so that's why it's there, I guess.
I think privacy.
We were trying to figure out why, because that was say we got into that discussion in EDA. What was the purpose? We believe it was started before EDA, and is there some redundancy there? So,
yes, there is redundancy.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, there are some reasons for the HRA. Probably not that we have time to get into tonight. That would be a good future discussion
for later.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move then to agenda item number 28, the pending agenda items. Any questions about the pending agenda items? If not, agenda item number 29, the information items, including the building permits, which was followed then by the upcoming meetings. And again, Sheila mentioned the city council will be involved in interviews of the city administrator candidates on October 3rd, Tuesday, all day. Which then brings us to agenda item number 31, to consider adjournment. I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Steve.
Second.
Seconded by Jim. Discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote.
All right.
Motion passes. We will now go into a work session.